All right, I posted 2 videos today and I was super interested in a lot of people suggesting Narset. And I was thinking, I guess I overlooked it because it's uncommon. And what is a planeswalker doing in uncommon? But people suggested Narset and I had to Google it to find out what they were talking about. Narset Parter of Veils has to be what they meant. This card's really crazy. Double impulse and it prevents your opponent from drawing more than one card each turn. So I decided I would try it. And as I was looking at where it would fit in the deck, I decided the card I would replace would be Fabricate. Fabricate digs for a specific card, Narset digs for it impulses, so it digs, but it doesn't specifically get the card you want. But Narset can go get, for example, it cannot hit a Trinket Mage, but it can go get Demonic Tutor or stuff like that. So it's not a pure impulse because you can't take a creature or land. So you could have a really unlucky turn of events where you Narset into 4 lands or you do 3 lands and like a Snapcaster and you can't take anything. But outside of those extremely rare and unlucky conditions, it's a pretty good card and it'll dig for other cards that dig for cards. So I said I'm going to replace Fabricate, a card that searches for target card, with Narset, a card that double searches but not targeted. And I want to see how it goes. But then I was noticing this first line about my opponent cannot draw more than one card per turn. And I thought, wow, I've got a combo in there. I could combine that with Dak Faden and I could actually make my opponent draw 1 on my turn, then discard 2. And that's kind of brutal. And then the more I thought about it, I realized, you know what? I have a super combo too if I want to run it. So I actually cut an island for now. I think I really would like to get a second island in here. I think 8 islands for Shackles is correct, but I'll play with 7 for now, and only 1 basic makes me nervous because of cards like Path to Exile and Ghost Quarter. But anyway, so I cut an island, I put Cephalid Coliseum in the deck. So what's the combo? This is a hard lock, game over. If they don't have the board, they do not get to play cards ever again. So the hard combo is, let's say my opponent has, I don't know, 2 cards in hand, okay? So I've got Teferi, Time Raveler out or whatever, and I play Narset. Of course, my opponent can't counterspell it. I then play Cephalid Coliseum and I say pass. I've got 5 mana up in this scenario and I have Threshold. My opponent draws for the turn, so they have now drawn for the turn, and they have 3 cards in hand in this example. And because Teferi's in play, they cannot play those cards until they get out of their draw step. So they couldn't do it during their untap, obviously, because you can't by the rules. They couldn't do it during their upkeep because of Teferi. They can't do it during their draw step because of Teferi. Before allowing them to exit their draw step, I then target them with Cephalid Coliseum and say draw 3 cards and discard 3. Well, Narset, because they've drawn 1 for the turn in this scenario, they've gone from 2 cards to 3. We're still in their draw step. Coliseum will attempt to force them to draw 3 more, but they cannot because Narset says they can't. So they don't draw the 3 cards, but Coliseum doesn't care. They still have to discard 3. And so you actually take all 3 cards away from them during their draw step, and they cannot play them even if they're holding 3 instants. Like even if they're holding Lightning Bolt, Swords to Plowshares, Disenchant. They can't play any of that because Teferi prevents them from doing it until they make it to their main phase. And so with these 3 cards, they're not getting to their main phase with the card. Now add in the last card to complete the lock, which is the one that we're already running, this guy. And what you now have is a infinite, so this combo right here, 3, 6, 9, and this, and of course Narset can dig for the combo, help you dig for the combo a little bit, as kind of an early Coliseum, I suppose. But these 3 cards and a Coliseum is a hard lock. The opponent will have to draw for the turn. You'll then make them attempt to draw 3 more. They can't. They discard the only card that they drew. They can't play any instants, so they just can't play Magic. The game's over. With the exception being Dredge. So if they have a Dredge card and if they're running like Dredge and you try this, they can replace their draw with the Dredge mechanic and work around Narset's limitation. But it is extremely rare circumstance. For the most part, this is a hard lock and it's game over. The other thing that's interesting here is you can actually Teferi something. Let's say they didn't have 2 cards in hand, say they had 1. You throw a Teferi down and bounce the card back to their hand and then Coliseum them with the Narset Teferi Coliseum thing. And the card that you bounced will be caught up in the Coliseum's effect. So it allows Teferi's bounce to actually be hard removal. So that's sort of living the dream. But if you don't have Teferi in this, you still have a combo right here. It's just, let's say you don't have Teferi and you don't have this. Just this right here is gross, right? It's just, hey, why don't you just discard 3 cards at instant speed? It's super, super brutal. So it gives us a whole nother, almost a mind twist for almost no cost at all. This is very similar to back when this deck had Notion Thief in it, except Notion Thief was fairly easy to kill and sometimes did nothing. Narset is hard to kill and always at least gives you the impulse effect as well. So pretty savage. So I was like, great idea, guys. Thank you very much, guys and gals, whoever responded. And I decided to play a game, and then I had the game that you're about to see. So take a look at this game. I really hope the replay works. I was excited after the game. It was this game against Patty Ben Patty. I also had a game against Turbo Bird, but I guess I'll throw that in at the end just so that you can see an extra game. But the Patty Ben Patty game is the purpose of this video primarily. So let's take a look at, because so my opponent's playing Toothy, Imaginary Friend, and Pure Imaginative Rascal. They're partners. Hate this mechanic. Anyway, Toothy though, if it leaves the battlefield, so even if you Swords to Plowshares it, so whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+1 counter, and when it leaves the battlefield, you draw for every +1/+1 counter it had. So at a minimum, it's your draw step is making this thing grow, and eventually your opponent has to deal with it, and when they do, you get rewarded in the form of a giant brain geyser equal to the number of times that you've had this out. But of course, you could power it up with cards like Brainstorm and things of that nature, and it can get really absurd really quickly. For the most part, on its own, this is the threat. The other card is kind of win more-ish and not that big of a deal, but Toothy is definitely a big threat. I start off with this hand here, and I'm looking like, hey, um, I've got Imperial Seal Dak Faden. I could actually find out how good is the I'm going to close this, is the Narset, because this hand, if I Imperial Seal for Narset, I can Dak Faden my opponent and make them draw 1 and discard 2 over and over, and might have something really cool going on while Narset's digging for better stuff. So it's like, I'm definitely keeping this. This is exciting. All right, let's go. All right, so my opponent gets to go first, does not first turn Soul Ring me, but does suspend a Search for Tomorrow. I get a Talisman of Progress down, and I natural draw Narset. And my opponent, look at this, Sylvan Library. Note that Sylvan Library is drawing 2 additional cards. So thank you, Narset, for being in this deck. It immediately pays off. So I impulse into a Demonic Tutor. So a Narset already was a Demonic Tutor for a Demonic Tutor, right? Just 3 mana, put a Demonic Tutor in my hand. But then my opponent is going to attempt to use Sylvan Library. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as it sounds. Now, if it said, because Sylvan Library says that if you choose to draw 2 additional cards, you have to put 2 cards back for each card drawn this way. When my opponent attempts to use it, what they get is a message that says unable to draw due to Narset, basically. But because they didn't draw 2 extra cards this way, they don't have to put 2 back. So it is not like Dak Faden. The Sylvan is just basically disenchanted until Narset gets off the table, which is still amazing, right? Because otherwise my opponent right here with only 2 cards in hand off this mulligan draw would have 5 in, well, they would have drawn 2 extra cards right here and a 4 in hand, and then on the next turn draw another 2 extra cards, right? So anyway, opponent then plays Toothy, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to approach this, because I'm going to go ahead and grab this land first. So if I use Narset here, if I minus it, then he could just attack and kill it. On the other hand, if I don't minus it and I Dak Faden my opponent, Toothy will get bigger and they can attack and kill it. So I was like trying to figure out how to do this. I really like the idea of getting the Narset Dak Faden thing going. The good thing though is if my opponent does attack and kill Narset, they've already skipped their draw phase, so this will suppress the Sylvan for at least 1 more turn. So with that in mind, I decide, because I really want to test and see how good this is, so I hit them with Dak Faden, and they had 2 cards in hand, they now have 1. I kill an Enlarge and a Spring to Mind. Um, I then Impulse with Narset and find a Teferi, and then I Demonic Tutor with the DT that I got for free last turn, taking a Mox Diamond, which I'll cast off the Delta and Imperial Seal. So I don't know which card you think I should get. I'll let you figure it out. But I really like this combo, and I also have the Teferi. Actually, I'm very close to locking up this game behind infinite no draw step. But anyway, opponent does get to attack and kill Narset here, and then plays a Chalice, which is a little confusing considering I still do have a Dak Faden on the board. They Tezzeret's Gambit and proliferate onto Toothy and the Chalice. I don't think they realize Dak Faden does more than just combo with Narset. But that is a lovely Chalice that I cannot help resist but take. So the card I got was Will because I want to keep this Narset thing going, right? So I get a Will into my hand, and then play Breya. Unfortunately, I felt like I need a blocker. I need some time. There was no real setup here where I could will Narset back out to Fairy and try to like put it all together. I think I was short on mana at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, and I need 9 to go Will, Narset, Teferi, Bouncer, Toothy. It just doesn't quite work out. So I have to give my opponent a chance to use their Sylvan Library once, hope it's not too bad. But then I've got triple chump blockers and I can throw these Planeswalkers down and really give my opponent a bad day. So we'll see how this goes. All right, so my opponent does get to Sylvan here. At least I have 2 mana up to protect Breya. Of course, that means Toothy's going to be gargantuan. Plays Hardened Scales, so a little bit win more there. Open into Wonder, which um, my opponent, when this creature hits me, they draw a card and it's unblockable. So this allows them to ding me for 9 and draw a card, which will make this a 10-10, but an 11-11 rather with Hardened Scales. But they have to hit me with it. It's not deals combat damage. So to anyone, it's only to a player. So they can't swing in and kill Dak Faden unless they're willing to give up that card and the +2 counters. Frankly, that might have been the better play for them, but they decide, 9 off of 17. That means they only have to hit me one more time and they win the game. So I guess I understand why they did this. But it does get a card in their hand also. But I'm now set up because the will allow me to replay a land. So I can make the will play here, but I have protection from my planeswalkers. So I will Narset first, um, and then I Dak Faden my opponent. So they had 1 card in hand, so they have to try to draw a card. They do, so they go up to 2. But then they discard 2 cards, so both cards are discarded, and I've triggered a draw for them. So they have drawn a card this turn, which means they cannot draw any more cards off Narset with Narset in play because this says they can't draw more than 1 card each turn. So if I were to have, say, played Narset and then Swords to Plowshare this, they would have actually gotten to draw a card and keep it. But now, thanks to Dak Faden, I'm going to go ahead and bounce that, and the opponent gets to draw, theoretically, 13 cards or whatever it was, but they can't because Narset's locking them down 100%. So they end up with their commander in their hand, and I get to draw a card off to Fairy, finds me a Mind Twist, so I'm going to be able to cast a Mind Twist at instant speed when I +1 to Fairy next turn and take away their draw step. Um, Meanwhile, a Narset lets me Impulse, and I Impulse and show them Chromatic Lantern and smash in for some damage and pass. And note, at this point, my opponent cannot play Counter Magic because of Teferi. They can't play anything with Suspend if they had anything like that. No instants. They can't draw extra cards, so Sylvan Library is still nerfed. So they get their 1 card, and my opponent, with just their commander in hand and 1 random card, looks at this board and says, nope, I lose. Scoops it up. So let's say they drew, I don't know, whatever. They play their commander and pass. Then on my turn, I get to, if the card is like a counterspell or something, it's stuck in their hand anyway. They can't play it, but I get to Dak Faden them and dump whatever the card is in their hand because they'll draw up to 2 and then discard 2. And then I get to Narset and go a little deeper into my library, sack the Thopters to kill their little guy, who then will trigger a draw ability for them if they had any counters on it, but that draw ability will be countered by Narset, so it'll die. And then lastly, they get to go to their draw step, and then during their draw step, they draw a card, and I Mind Twist it out of their hand because I will have plussed up to Fairy. And I actually Mind Twist during their draw step and take the card that they get, and they can't take extra cards with Sylvan. It's just insanely brutal, right? Absolutely enjoyable. I love the suggestion of Narset. Thank you so much, guys and gals who participated in that conversation. I definitely appreciate it. And that's it. That's all I've got. It was just that one game. I think I'll throw in, like I said, the one extra game against Turbo Bird. I don't remember how it went. Just a bonus game for the video. But that was the focus. And hopefully we'll have lots more uh, shenanigans with the old Narset thing there. What, I had Teferi. So the funny thing is, if you look at that, I was going to get to Mind Twist them during draw step, right? And then take that away. On the next turn, I could have played Teferi and then Teferi for one to go get Cephalid Coliseum, play Cephalid Coliseum, and then Mind Twist them again with the Coliseum to take away their next draw step. And after that turn, I would Teferi, I said Teferi, Tezzeret. And then on the next turn, I would Tezzeret for three. And Tezzeret for three would go and get Crucible. I'd replay the Coliseum, and then that's the hard lock. No draw step for them for the rest of the game. So that, whether I don't know if you had seen it, but I actually, at the end of that game, my opponent was not going to get a draw step for the rest of the game, period. Totally insane. All right, so this game against Turbo Bird, though, is playing God Eternal Kefnet, which seems like a pretty amazing card, actually. Um, and my opponent can slam it here, but decides to go for a plea for power. So they get 3 extra cards, but they don't have a threat in play, and I've got a very good hand for a threatless board. Opponent's Mana Vault is gone, so this is almost like only drawing 2 because of the Mana Vault thing going away. They go for a Chalice. I decided I'm going to remand this because Mana Drain would give me 0 mana, and they missed a land drop. I was hoping that mean they didn't have one, and it turned out they did. So Turbo Bird goes back to 8 cards in hand and has to discard. So I use my map on the next turn to strip mine them. I'm going to try to Mana Drain into Teferi, but um, if I can do this, yeah, my opponent has to discard here, and look what I drew. It's just gross, right? Now I don't have to do anything this game, and Turbo Bird still hasn't found any mana, and Turbo concedes. So had my opponent not conceded, of course, if they played a land and had a 2-drop, I get to Mana Drain it. If they don't, I get to play a land and Merchant Scroll for Force of Will and pass with Mana Drain and Force of Will. And then on the turn after that, I would have got to play Throne of the High City and sack it and immediately start drawing 2 cards per turn with a Force of Will in my hand against an empty board and slow development on the blue side. So uh, that game was definitely over, with Crucible of Worlds to follow shortly after that in order to infinitely strip the mono blue player. Mono blue is much less of a threat in this format than it was when the 1v1 format where they banned strip mine, and that's a good sample of why. So that's it. That's all I've got. Hopefully you enjoyed watching the games. We'll see if Fabricate ends up coming back. I feel like, I mean, Fabricate's an insane card that probably should be here, but at the same time, I mean, where do I put it? Where do I put the card? Everything's always about what do I cut, and I think Fabricate's probably worse than Trinket Mage. The Trinket Mage gets plenty of key cards, mainly these. So if you get any of these 3 cards, top, clamp, or map, you can draw extra cards with the Trinket Mage. You can clamp, putting it on the Trinket Mage or later on Breya tokens, and hopefully get some cards that way. You can Expedition map, and you can go get Throne of the High City and get extra cards that way. You can Sensei's Divining Top and then just combine it with your fetch lands to find all your other good stuff and get extra cards that way. So Trinket Mage already gets extra cards, but Trinket Mage also goes and gets Soul Ring. Uh, Typically, you're going to go get Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, or one of these 3 cards here, but they're all about the same. Basically, you're going to get Fast Mana, usually not this one, frankly. You're going to get Opal when you can, Diamond when you can't, or Crypt or Soul Ring. So you get fast mana off a Trinket Mage. So basically, Trinket Mage gets everything that you need, either cards or mana. So unless you specifically need Winter Orb or Vedokin Shackles, Trinket Mage is just better because it comes with a body. And if you have Cavern of Souls, it can't be countered because you will name human, and Trinket Mage is also human. So I don't think Trinket Mage is better, or rather, I think Trinket Mage is better than Fabricate in this deck, but Fabricate may be long. That's what I leave up to you, my friends, to tell me. If you think that Fabricate should go in this deck, back into the deck. Let me know where you think the cut needs to be made, but otherwise, very excited. Thank you for the Narset suggestion, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.